Silent Night is directed by John Woo and stars Joel Kinnaman, Kid Cudi, and among others. And this story deals with a father who's trying to get basically revenge on the leader of these gang members and stuff after they tragically killed his son, and he's on his way for revenge. And it takes place during Christmas time. Now, here's a little backstory. Now, this movie was directed by John Woo, and I've been an avid fan of John Woo for a lot of his old movies he used to do from his American films from the 90s, and I haven't really watched like much of his movies from China, which included like Hard Boiled and all that, but I have seen The Killer, which was good. Oh, and by the way, we got Lance back with us again this time for a guest review.
Hello.
Yeah, and he's an avid fan of John Woo movies as well. Especially, well, he's only seen the American ones like Broken Arrow, Face Off, and all that.
Yeah.
And even to this day, those movies still hold up as like some of my all-time favorite action movies.
They're great movies.
Yeah, especially the way that he was able to incorporate a lot of fun stuff that we know and love. Like, well, he's got to have those doves, you got to have the shootouts, things like that. But believe it or not, I think the first like John Woo movie I ever watched when I was a kid was probably Broken Arrow. Like that movie, like really put me on the map of like like who is this director? You know, he was making like all these really he made like such like fun villains and stuff, especially with John Travolta. Where he's always like, yeah, ain't it cool? You know. What was your first John Woo movie you watched, if you remember?
Probably Face Off.
Face Off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably Face Off.
Yeah, it was
Which is a great movie.
It is, especially the way that, you know, believe it or not, that was actually one, Face Off was one where it took a while to get the right actors in line, because originally he was going to have Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone coming in to basically play off each other, but I think he made the right choice.
Yeah, glad it wound up with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta.
Yeah.
I think Arnold and Sly probably wouldn't have been the best choice for that movie.
Yeah, but I mean, they eventually did get movies later with themselves working together, but yeah, that was the perfect choice having them two. And so it just always seemed to me like John Woo was those kind of directors that when he made action films, he was always having that kind of style that we love, with whether it's the villains having one-liners, whether it's the the dual stuff that involves with the hero and the villain. And also, I don't know, he didn't invent this, but he was one of the influences of The Matrix too, when it came to having slow motion in movies and stuff, and things like that. And so I haven't seen some of his other films like Wind Talkers or Paycheck, but this was basically John Woo's first American film in 20 years, because after he did Paycheck, he pretty much went back to China and started doing all of his other films there. But going to the trailers for this, I actually got really interested because it was one of those kind of movies that I didn't even know it was coming out, you know, and knowing that it was going to be directed by John Woo, I was like, damn, first movie in 20 years, the guy comes back. And then after getting a chance to finally check it out, I was like, you know, I was kind of surprised with it. It has its issues here and there that kind of hold it back, but I still thought it was, you know, it was still fun.
Yeah, it was a great movie.
Yeah.
Awesome that it centers around Christmas time. You know, it's good to have an action Christmas film.
Which is funny because last year we had something like that called Violent Night, and I was kind of thinking like, wait, is this supposed to be a sequel? Or to probably that one or something? And it's also even more confusing because there was a film that came out like about 10 years ago about a killer Santa Claus, also called Silent Night.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's pretty a generic title that can, you know, get confusing. But after getting my pros out of the way, I thought that Joel Kinnaman really did a great job in this. You know, he really brought that vulnerability to the character. And the gimmick that we have in this is that he's able to, you know, John was able to make almost all the characters not speak.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing, is that you hear like stuff on the background, like in the radio and stuff, of people talking, and you'll hear like vague like voices here and there, like in the background. But all the main characters in this don't have any dialogue, and that can be a good thing and a bad thing, just depending on how you see it.
Yeah, there's hardly no dialogue in the movie, which is pretty cool. All of it is like centered around text messaging, which is kind of cool.
It is.
Hardly no spoken words at all.
Yeah, but that can also, I'll get into some of my cons with that in a little bit, but I think that does make the whole experience worth it, because you're also seeing how things would be with him pretty much not talking. And on paper, I could see with them trying to go with that as far as, you know, since he can't talk, he has to be centered around, you know, delivering like either sign language or some other ways to communicate.
Yeah, it's pretty cool how, you know, how it forces them to emote more.
Yeah.
It forces all the actors to emote and really get their point across without words, which is pretty cool. Just getting everything across through action and movement.
Yeah, and you're just hearing like the gunshots and a lot of other things. And in fact, it reminds me a lot of if like it was almost like John Woo was trying to make an old classic 20s silent film era, where the characters would not be speaking, because anytime if you've seen those kind of older films, they would only have like text boxes come up and stuff when the characters are talking. And so him kind of going, he wasn't necessarily going on that route, but you could see that he was trying to make it where it's all visualizing, and that can work to its advantage.
And it's pretty cool. I think everybody does a fantastic job of it, because you hardly even realize that they're not speaking. Like, you don't even. It's not something that even registers.
It doesn't, yeah. And to get my other pros, I also got to really appreciate a lot of the gunshots and the brutality that gets this movie top notch. You know, it's John Woo, so it's kind of what I would expect with him pulling off them, you know, hardcore shootouts that he's known for. And there's even some nods to, I think, probably his other films they put in there, like like with Face Off, Hard Target, and stuff like that, and maybe even some of his other movies they made from China that I heard were good too. Like, sure, there's references to Hard Boiled in there and things like that. But what I really appreciate with the action scenes is that they do actually make it to where they take their time, like build up to it, because unlike some other action hero movies that we've seen where the characters are kind of invulnerable stuff, I like that he was able to make it where he's kind of just a regular citizen. He's not a cop or anything, and he has to pretty much like build himself up with, you know, learning how to train and stuff, watching YouTube videos and things like that. And that does work as to advantage, because Joel Kinnaman goes through fucking hell in this movie. Like, he is really getting his ass handed to him a lot because he's not experienced. Yeah. So with him going revenge, it really makes it a very gritty and grounded approach like that. There is some things that I do kind of like a minor con with when it has to do with the climax, but for the most part, it works to its advantage like that, you know. And then, of course, you know, you also got the way that the movie is building upon with him, you know, going on the revenge area. We do get some like build up as far as like him going through the motions with his son and stuff, and I thought that really worked too.
Yeah. Then speaking of that, you know, there's a lot of throwbacks to Face Off. You know,
yeah, that definitely reminds you of that.
It feels a lot like Face Off with the son aspect, and how he shows flashbacks of the son and things like that.
Yeah. And in fact, I almost thought at one point he was going to do the thing like he did at Face Off with the whole, you know, like that. I was like, oh, that I'm surprised he didn't go that route, John Woo. But I mean, there's more I can go into detail, but like that's really kind of the general gist of it. And you know, the pacing, you know, can be slow depending on how you get into it. But I think that the build up really did with that, especially in the first hour.
I think it does really well building up with. I mean, it's barely an hour and a half. The movie, and you know, I think that he does well with his time.
He does, yeah. And I like the Christmas setting they do it well. And while there's hardly enough of it, it's still cool that it is taking place during that time. Yeah. You know, and on top of that, I gotta also appreciate when it gets to the final climax, that's when things really turn top notch. And some of the direction, like the camera movements and stuff, there's a whole sequence where he's going through like the upstairs and things like that. It's almost like video game form where you're trying to reach the final boss. And that's something that reminded me straight out of like one of the John Wick movies or something, but in a good way. Because, I think the John Wick movies were more or less influenced by John Woo. But John Woo put a cool thing where he's making it where it's mostly one take. Where it's like you're focusing on him going through the fucking stairs. And like it does a great job in that area. And some of the other car sequences as well are pretty cool too. Like when he has this Mustang that he drives, that's all kind of beaten up and stuff. I like how he has to keep practicing and stuff like that to really get it right as far as like when he's going after his enemies. Now, if I do have to get into some of my cons, I will have to say one of the things that does kind of hold the movie back is that while I do appreciate the whole thing with it being mostly about dialogue, there's instances where I feel like the characters could have had dialogue speaking parts that would probably, you know, made the story a lot more gripping in certain ways. Right. Especially, it mainly has to do with the police officer that comes in, the detective that they bring on, where it does seem like there's more a story that we could have built up with him, why he goes after the other guys, the gang members. Yeah,
you really don't have a lot of development with the detective, and you don't have a lot of development of the dynamic between Joel Kinnaman's character and the detective's character to really go off of.
Yeah, and I get that you're trying to basically visualize stuff because he's giving him basically messages throughout the film to like kind of like lead up to it. But that's where I feel like if you would have went on a different direction where Joel Kinnaman's character is the one just silent that he has to communicate and have the rest of the characters talk, I think probably could have worked better. Or if you wanted to go a different route, which I don't think would have worked, because if the other alternative I think they could have went with is if he's deaf. Because that way you could basically have it to where the characters are talking to him, but they have to communicate like that. But the problem I have with that is it wouldn't have worked because I couldn't buy him being deaf.
No.
You know, because all the stuff that he's going through, realistically, with like all the gunshots and stuff, I couldn't buy it.
Yeah, have to be able to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think that is one of the struggles that the movie has with that. And on top of that, I feel like the villain also could have been developed a lot more because John Woo, if you know him from a lot of his other American films, he likes to build up like really great iconic villains in a lot of his films. Mainly his ones from the 90s, of course. But like, it's crazy that from the beginning we get the introduction to the villain, but we don't see the villain for almost until about a quarter left of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's really, you know, it takes a long time to really get back, and we don't really know much about him because of the fact that he's a gang member that's ruling the city and stuff, and, you know, he's into drugs, things like that, but we don't really see the really good dynamic that would get Joel Kinnaman to go after him.
Yeah, I mean, he does well with establishing the villain's a bad guy, like a really bad person.
Right.
But there could have been more development there.
Yeah, we could have seen more about what he could really is more capable of doing because other than, you know, him getting injured and, you know, having like the stuff where he sends his goons on stuff, we really don't see much of what the villain does other than the fact that he gives his girlfriend pretty much drugs.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it. I'm like, we need to see more of them, you know? And on top of that, that kind of does kind of have a climax that leads to, which like I said, I do enjoy, but I think the payoff could have been a lot better. I'm not going to go into spoilers, but it really felt like there was so much that they really get into, and it just kind of goes,
Feels
that's
rushed.
it? Yeah, it feels rushed.
The ending feels really, really rushed, where they could have probably done a little bit more in making it a solid ending.
Yeah, and on top of that, there were a couple other scenes where some of the scenes where he's, you know, reminiscing about his son and stuff. It can be good at times, but there are a couple points where it does feel like it's a little dragged out because it's like they're repeating the same stuff. So I think that they could have maybe cut back a little bit on that part.
Yeah, cut back a little bit on
Just
that.
a little bit, not too much because you really need the whole focus on that, but it does kind of get repetitive at points. But overall, though, I mean, there's more I can go into, but this movie still was an enjoyable, good return to form for John Woo, and it's not going to be one of his best or anything, but it's still going to be something I can probably see myself watching at least on Christmas time at least. You know, and so with that, I'm just going to give the movie just a high average on the Film Freaks meter. What kind of rating would you give it? Out of like a 10 or whatever?
Out of a 10, probably a 7.
I got you.
You know, good movie. Good movie. Definitely watch it around Christmas time.
Yeah.
You know, it's don't go in expecting a face-off or something to that caliber.
Yeah. Well,
but still good. Still worth a watch for sure.
fair enough. For those of you who have also seen Silent Night, let me know in the comments of what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.